They say that talking to yourself is a sign of insanity. But I'm pretty sure that's only if you answer back, right? Right. This is Talking to Myself, the Art Advice podcast where I use anecdotes from my life, trying to make myself a better artist, and maybe a better person. While others might get some use out of this also, mostly I'm just trying to avoid paying for therapy. Today on the podcast, I thought we'd talk about the issue of confidence and my sort of journey through it, to it, trying to be confident for things like podcasts. First, a little backstory, anecdote type action. I've always been kind of a quiet person, very withdrawn. I can be, some would even say, gregarious and boisterous if I'm in the right company, if I'm really happy and comfortable around people, but there haven't been very many people in my life like that. I'm very introverted. I tend to keep to myself. I have always had a habit of speaking really quietly, mostly because I felt like what I had to say wasn't important. And even to this day, I'm kind of mostly over that now. I realize that, I do say things that are vaguely important and people should probably be able to understand, so I should make an effort to enunciate. But even these days, occasionally, I'll say something and someone will react and they'll understand what I've said, and it still amazes me that I've been able to communicate that with another person, that they actually heard me and they were paying attention. That's a very messed up way to think about life, and it's all tied up in the feelings of self-worth and all that, and it's not good. But at least I'm recognizing that now and realizing that it's not correct behavior, and I'm not thinking right about that. So it's more of an anomaly now. But in the old days, when I was younger, especially in school, that was sort of the norm. I was always the kid that has to be asked to speak up because they couldn't understand what I was saying, which, of course, confronting someone like that usually pushes them further down in the hole. It makes them more uncomfortable. It just always seemed like aggressive, pushy people were more successful socially. But I found it distasteful to be aggressive and pushy because I didn't feel like what I had to say, again, was worth listening to. And a lot of this has paid off in my artwork, because for the longest time when I was younger, I didn't want to show anyone the kind of stuff I did. When I did something for me, when I did something that really said something I wanted to say, I wasn't just doing, hey, look, this realistic drawing of a hand, or this looks just like your car, or whatever the hell. When I was trying to do something that actually said something, or tried to express something I felt, it was difficult for me to share that with people because I was worried that they wouldn't get it. They'd misunderstand or not care. But I was also worried that they would get it, and therefore I would be exposed. The thing that I felt would actually be out there. What I didn't realize, that by making the piece of art that expresses the thing that I feel, that's already putting it out there. Someone's going to understand it, hopefully, many people. And you have to sort of be aware of that. The act of making it can just be for yourself. It can just be an expression of something, just helps you through something. When I was in high school, and just before junior high, I wrote some really horrible poetry, as you do, as most students of that age do, just god-awful stuff. And I didn't study a lot of poetry, so it wasn't even structurally good. It wasn't necessarily just rhyming limerick type stuff, but a lot of it was bad. But I wrote some stuff that really helped me and actually had a catharsis at one point because of something I wrote. I felt like I let go of some tension. I let go of some anxiety. In one burst, I felt better. And that was amazing to me. That was like, well, if stuff like this can do this, I'm going to do more of it. So I started writing a bunch more really, really crappy poetry, and I submitted it to some of it to the college. I went to college eventually, and I continued writing this god-awful, just poetry. And I'm not saying that because I'm down on myself. It was objectively bad, just shallow. And I mean, when you're an introvert, you don't have a whole lot to say. Sometimes you haven't got a lot of experience to express. I never had social interactions to talk about. There was no great love. There was no great loss. Sure, bad things had happened to me, but I wasn't talking about those. I was too scared to talk about those. So I was talking in metaphor about other things like movies I'd seen and stuff. It was pretty bad. But anyway, I submitted some of them to the school journal for poetry, like a dozen of them, and they all got completely ignored. Not just rejected, but I never heard anything. The notes I got before I submitted anything was they were really looking for some French poetry, French language poetry. I was like, why the hell would you want that? This is an American institution, and we don't even have a French major at this school. That sounds really pretentious to me. And I'm pretty sure it was. That's the society I was trying to exist within as myself, which is, I found that really pretentious. But so was my poetry. It was god awful, like I said. So I stopped doing poetry after that because it was, ugh. And even to this day, when I read poetry, I have to sort of think about it in the context of someone put some effort into this. Like when you look at a painting that doesn't strike you immediately, you're like, I don't know if I like that or not. You have to look at it from a technical point of view. You're like, I can appreciate the skill it takes to do this, but I don't have to enjoy it on its artistic merits because it doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't strike a chord with me emotionally. And all my poetry was like that with everyone. So the expression through the poetry was not something that was useful to me, to other people. It was to me, that one instance especially, because it made me feel better. So in the future, when I had those kind of events happen to me with the art, I'd do a drawing or something like that, and I would have a really good feeling. I didn't need to show it to anybody to get validation. That was what I got from it, was the good feeling, the release. And maybe that led me to be less confident about submitting things to people. Maybe I felt like because I didn't need anything extra, why would I go take the risk of rejection by showing people this thing? But as all visual artists know, eventually you have to show your stuff to people in order for people to see it. That's how reality works. Especially if you're trying to make a career out of art, you have to put out so much stuff that is not what you want people to see. It's like, let's say you do 100 paintings in a year, and I don't even paint really, so this is a weird example, but let's say you do 100 paintings in a year. You create 100 pieces of art in a year. That's a lot. Not all of them are going to be great. Not all of them are going to be the best of your ability by any means. But if you show 100 pieces a year, the amount of positive feedback you get will be much higher than if you show the top 10, the ones you think are the best 10 in a year. Even if everyone loves the top 10, 100 of them, you're going to have at least 20, 30 pieces that people like, varying degrees of like. So that's just a numbers game, really. It's almost like the cold business sense of it. So it makes more sense to be confident about putting your stuff out there, even if you're not terribly confident in the piece itself. Now, I'm not saying put out something that is well below your ability that you feel like badly reflects on your skill, because that might be the first piece of yours someone sees, and if they see that only, they're going to judge you based on that. So there's a certain baseline quality that you want to shoot for. But if you're producing 100 pieces a year, they will all have a certain baseline quality. That's just the amount, that's just the side effect of doing that much work. And you can't even see it yourself sometimes, because you'll judge your stuff a little more harshly sometimes than other people will, because you know your faults, you know your flaws, you know the things you don't do very well, the things you shy away from doing because you feel like you don't do them very well. Whereas other people might not even notice that. You'll say, well, I don't do hands very well, so I've either avoided hands or I've got bad hands. And they'll be like, I didn't even notice the hands. I was looking at the pose, or I was looking at the background, the composition of the colors, or whatever. Things like that can really help you, because you come to realize that if you're trying to communicate something through the art, you have to do that. You have to put it out there. And I know it's really simple and stupid for me to just say, make stuff, put it in front of people. Make stuff, put it in front of people, and then make stuff and put it in front of people. But that's pretty much, that's how it's supposed to work. Those are the basic requirements of having an art career. If you want people to know you do art, which they have to in order to supply you with custom, you have to show them that you do art. I mean, even if you're just trying to do something in the private sector, like you're trying to get a job in art, a studio job or something, you have to show them at least that you can do art. Making things to the best of your ability and being prepared to show them to other people, having that confidence is extremely important. Now, having said that, the flip side is, I don't think you should feel like you have to share every single thing you do. To me, that feels a lot like the way people that are big on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that do, where they do vlogs of their life. Sometimes that's interesting. I mean, it's cool to see what their life is like, but I think you'll find if you watch a month's worth of vlogs from someone, you don't learn a lot about, I mean, you learn a lot about their life, like the quirks of their life, but if they're vlogging every day, except for the minutia of daily life on someone else's behalf, it's not terribly interesting, usually. I mean, good vloggers tend to add a lot more spice to it than just here's what my day was like, but I mean, if you've got a life of your own, it's certainly not much more interesting than that, I would hope. I mean, these days, everyone's life is pretty similar, I imagine, if you're stuck in quarantine. Had I been in quarantine, the difference would be I'd be recording more of these and I wouldn't be working. That would be the difference. The issue is I didn't have confidence when I was younger. I kind of have confidence now, and the only reason I have it now is because I've had a few positive results happen from things when I took the impetus to be confident. This is outside of art still. I remember the first time I don't know how the first meeting of someone, when you fall in love with them or you start dating them. You know what I mean? What do you call that when you first meet someone? Is there some sort of phrase for that? Anyway, I remember being at a group meeting of an art group back in college. I had actually graduated the year before, but I was still part of the group, so we had meetings every evening or so, every once a week at this bar. And I was hanging out, and I got into a discussion with one of the guys, and I noticed this girl was making eyes at me, kind of. Not to be too arrogant, but it seemed like that was happening. So, encouraged by her attention, I became more gregarious and sort of on comedically. So I started making jokes and stuff, and we had a great night. I felt very good about engaging the crowd and being funny, and we ended up dating. So, you know, that was good. That was a very positive response. I've had to do speeches for school lots of times, and a couple of times for social engagements, organizational stuff, and things like that. And I usually hate that because I'm terrible at public speaking. But if I can manage to get out of my head, you know, relaxing and think of it as a fun thing to do, trick myself, basically lying to myself, then I can enjoy it and it ends up being fine. And that is a way confidence can be rewarded too. The reward is short-lived, it's limited. It can spurn you on to some great things. If someone says something, they love something on Instagram, I'm like, ooh, just like everyone else, I get that endorphin hit. I'm like, yay, someone liked my whatever. It doesn't actually end up translating into much of anything solid as far as art career goes usually. But there have rarely been occasions where I've gotten jobs because just happening to have something out there that someone came across and liked. That happens. So here's the part where I talk to my future self. Hey, future self. Hopefully the new version of the podcast is better than this, because this is rambly and horrible, but I'm still going to put it out there because I'm being confident. But hopefully, future self, you're doing better. Did you ever overcome your fear of being confident? Did you ever become confident all the time? Did you ever feel like if you make something you're proud of, you should be happy to share it with everyone in the world, even if they hate it? Let's hope so. But even if you didn't, President Nathan is pretty happy with his level of confidence as far as his art goes. Relatively. Thanks to everybody for listening. I really appreciate you all being here. As I mentioned before, and I've mentioned several times, this will be the last episode of the podcast that I do in this exact format. It'll still be called Talking to Myself. I'll still be doing similar things, but I won't necessarily be following the format of anecdote lesson. It'll be more of a casual thing. We'll see. Also, I'm going to be taking off the first week, possibly 2 of January, just because I need to do some housekeeping things in the studio, and I need to get my head straight around a few things. So more than likely, there won't be any podcasts for the first 2 weeks of January. Hope you guys had a wonderful holiday season. Have a great, happy new year. Just remember that 2020 was a complete disaster. It's almost over. But we can always learn from disasters. So, you know, buy some insurance. Hopefully 2021 will be better. Everybody take care of yourself. Special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. You guys get to hear and see these a week ahead of everyone else. That will continue with the new podcast format, and there'll be some additional things to make up for the weeks that I'm not doing the podcast, so don't worry. Still things for you, because you are the shiniest people I know. Everybody take care. Have a great New Year's, and I'll see you relatively soon. Bye for now.